Close your eyes for a second. I want you to imagine a coastline. It's pristine, white sand, clear water, just teeming with mullet and redfish.
Mm-hmm.
It's a place that is known, it's a place that is used, but it's not a place where anyone actually lives.
And that is a really crucial distinction to make right off the bat.
Right. Picture a bay where people just flow in and out, like the tide. They show up, they fish, maybe they salt their catch for the journey home.
A little trade here and there.
Yeah, trade with a passing schooner, and then they're gone. They vanish. They go back to the wider world. It's like a pantry. It's a safe harbor. It's a really nice campsite.
But it's not a home.
It is not a home.
It's the difference between a place being somewhere on a map, a coordinate you pass through, and a place being here, a real destination, a community.
And that is exactly where we find ourselves today. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are continuing our series on the history of St. Andrews.
Correct.
Now, if you tuned in for our last deep dive, Under Changing Flags, we looked at the big picture. We watched empires, Spain, Britain, the U.S., just tossing this region back and forth.
Like a geopolitical football, yeah. That was the view from 30,000 feet. It was all about treaties and borders drawn by people who had never even seen the place.
Exactly. But today we are landing the plane. We're zooming in from the map room right down to the ground. This is Chapter 2, the arrival of John Clark.
And this really is the pivot point. If the last deep dive was about ownership, this one is about occupation. It's about that specific moment a decision was made to stop visiting St. Andrews and start inhabiting it.
And it all centers on one man.
One very specific human being.
And what a human being he was. I have to be honest, when I started reading the source material for this, I was expecting the typical frontier story. The type.
Oh, yeah. Some scrappy unknown drifter.
Right, maybe a guy running from debt or the law looking for a lucky break.
The rugged nobody stereotype.
But John Clark, he is the absolute opposite of that. He was a heavyweight.
He was absolutely a somebody. And that's what makes this whole origin story so unusual. You have a man with a massive national reputation, a former governor of Georgia, a man with wealth, with political connections.
Deciding to pack it all up and move to what was, essentially, the edge of the known universe.
It's a huge question.
So our mission today is to unpack that. Why does a man who has everything move to a place that has, well, nothing but trees and water? We're going to look at the man before the bay, the house he built that just screamed permanence.
And the tragic irony of how his connection to the outside world, the very thing that made him powerful, was also his doom.
It's a story about gravity, really.
That's a good way to put it. How one person's presence can create enough gravity to pull a whole community into existence.
Well, let's get into the source of that gravity, the man himself. Because the sources are very clear. You cannot understand why St. Andrews became a town without understanding who John Clark was before he ever saw Florida. He wasn't just a settler.
No, he was a warrior.
And warrior isn't hyperbole here, is it?
Not at all. I mean, his resume reads like an action movie script. He was born in 1766, and by the time he was 14, he had left school to join the Revolutionary War.
14. Let's just pause on that. At 14, my biggest problem was algebra homework.
He was fighting the British Empire.
Unbelievable.
He was fighting alongside his father, Major Elijah Clark, who was a legend himself. And John wasn't just, in the rear guard. He was a scout. He was fighting Tories, American loyalists. And that fighting in the South was incredibly vicious.
And he didn't just survive it. He moved up the ranks.
Incredibly fast. He was a captain by age 16. He fought at the Siege of Augusta, Jack's Creek, Musgrove's Mills.
He was wounded, right, at Musgrove's Mills.
He was. So this was a child, essentially, but a child forged in just the absolute brutality of 18th century combat.
And that kind of childhood, it shakes you. You don't just turn that off when the war's over.
No, you don't. That intensity followed him right into his civilian life. He goes into Georgia politics, becomes governor from 1819 to 1823. But he wasn't your polished, shake hands and kiss babies politician.
I loved the descriptions in the notes. Strong-willed, virile.
Which seemed like polite historical ways of saying he was a guy you did not want to mess with.
Exactly.
He led a massive political faction, the Clark Party. And he had this bitter, lifelong rivalry with a man named William H. Crawford. And when we say rivalry back then...
We're not talking about mean editorial.
No, we're talking pistols at dawn. Literally. They fought a duel. That's some major politician squaring off with a pistol. Clark actually wounded Crawford in the wrist.
That detail just establishes his character so perfectly. But it also sets up the central mystery of this deep dive. You have a governor, a general, a duelist. Why leave? Why trade the governor's mansion for a remote bluff in Florida?
It's a fascinating mix of push and pull factors.
Hmm.
On the push side, I mean, think about that life. War since age 14, constant political battling. The duel. The sources say he was seeking peaceful quietude.
He was just burned out.
I think there was genuine exhaustion. He wanted to escape the noise. But there was also a very pragmatic economic reason pushing him. The nation had just gone through the panic of 1819.
Which was a big deal, right?
Oh, a huge deal. It was the country's first Great Depression, essentially, the first major peacetime financial crisis. This era of easy money, credit, and wild land speculation just collapsed.
So people started looking for real value.
Exactly. They stopped looking for paper-walled stocks, speculation,
Yeah.
and started looking for resources, timber, land that could actually produce something.
So St. Andrews wasn't just a pretty view for Clark. It was a fundamental asset. It had timber, a harbor, food. It was real in a way that paper money wasn't.
It was a flight to substance, but, and this is a key detail, he wasn't fully retired. He had a job to do. His friend, President Andrew Jackson.
Another tough frontier type.
Right. Jackson appointed Clark to a specific federal position.
Keeper of the public forests of Florida.
That's the one.
It sounds like a fantasy title, like he's guarding the Ents in Middle-earth or something.
It sounds grand, but it was an extremely serious job. You have to remember, in the 1820s, the U.S. Navy ran on wood, specifically live oak.
For the warships.
Incredibly dense, rot-resistant wood for the hulls of warships like old Ironsides. And Florida was full of this strategic resource. Clark wasn't a park ranger. He was protecting military assets from poachers.
And the notes say he actually stopped a local mill from cutting pine illegally.
Yes, he did. So he arrives with this mix: a desire for personal peace, a need for economic stability, and a federal mandate. And that brings him to the Bay.
Okay, so he's here, he's got his job. Now let's talk about where he plants his flag. Because it's all about location, location, location.
And Clark did not do random. He chose a spot in what we now call the Old Town District, near modern Beach Drive and Frankfort Avenue. It was tactical. He chose a high bluff. First, you catch the breeze, which before AC was everything. Second, there was a fresh spring nearby for water. And crucially, you have this commanding view of the bay's entrance.
He could see who was coming and going.
Exactly.
And on this bluff, he doesn't build a little shack. He doesn't build a temporary lean-to like the fishermen before him.
No. This is where that concept of permanence really comes into play. He built a house that makes a loud, loud statement. The sources describe it as a 60-foot-long structure made of hewn pine logs.
60 feet long. In the 1820s frontier, that's a mansion.
It is. And think about the labor of hewn pine logs. That means chopping a round log square with an adze. It's an immense amount of work. It communicates something very specific.
It says, I am not moving.
It says, this is civilization. And that created what I call the gravity effect. Before Clark, people were scattered. But once a former governor builds a mansion on the bluff, it validates the location. It gives it credibility.
It's like when a major anchor tenant moves into a mall. Suddenly, everyone else feels safe investing there.
Precisely. And because of Clark, you see others follow. Captain William Lofton arrives in 1830. Suddenly, it's not just isolated camps anymore. It's a neighborhood. Clark provided the anchor.
I want to zoom in on what life was actually like for him there from 1827 to 1832, because the picture the sources paint sounds, honestly, kind of amazing.
It does sound surprisingly idyllic, doesn't it? He's in his 60s now. He survived the wars, left the political knife fights behind, and the sources say he spent his time sailing, fishing, bathing in the Gulf.
And he had more than a rowboat. The notes say, a fine yacht.
Right, which he used for supply runs to Pensacola in New Orleans. So he wasn't totally roughing it. He was bringing in luxuries, maintaining his standard of living.
There's a detail in the notes that I just loved, the garden. He planted a large purple fig tree in mint.
And those details are so important. You don't plant a fig tree if you plan to leave in 6 months. A tree is an investment in the future. It's a statement of faith.
And the mint.
The mints suggest hospitality. Maybe for tea, maybe for mint juleps. He was a Southern gentleman. It shows he was making a home, not just a base. He expected to entertain guests.
And he did. He hosted visitors, keeping that connection to the outside world.
But we have to balance that image of the yacht and the mint juleps with the reality of the isolation. I mean, for the first few years, they had almost no neighbors. There's a note that when surveyors came through in 1831, they marked the road simply as,
Road to Governor Clark's.
that's it.
That's wild. The entire infrastructure of the area was defined by this one guy's house.
That's the definition of a pioneer. You aren't just at the landmark, you are the landmark.
But, and there's always a but, this Adel couldn't last. And the tragedy here is just so thick with irony.
It really is. The very thing that made his life comfortable, his mobility, his connection to the world, is what ultimately killed him.
So let's walk through it. It's the fall of 1832. Clark takes his yacht to New Orleans.
New Orleans was the metropolis of the South, the center of commerce. But it was also a hotbed for disease. Port cities in the 19th century were dangerous places, and yellow fever was prevalent there that season.
So he goes for supplies or business, and unknowingly he brings the fatal germs back.
Back to his secluded sanctuary.
He gets back to the bluff, to his fig tree, and he thinks he's safe, but he's sick.
He died on October 12, 1832.
And it didn't stop there.
No. His wife, Nancy, who had been with him through everything, she died just 2 weeks later, October 26.
Heartbreaking. To build this paradise, to finally find peace, and then to have it snatched away by a mosquito bite from a trip to the city.
And here's a fascinating, if grim, statistic from the notes. These were the only known cases of yellow fever in the entire history of St. Andrews Bay.
Wait, really just them?
Just them. St. Andrews was generally extremely healthy, the salt air, the isolation. People moved there for their health. This is a tragedy imported exclusively by the wealth and mobility that made Clark so successful.
If he'd been a poor fisherman who never left the bay, he might have lived another 10 years.
It's a heavy thought. The yacht was his freedom. It was also his doom. They were buried right there, weren't they?
Yes, about 300 feet east of the house. They lay there for nearly a century before being moved to the Marietta National Cemetery in Georgia in 1923.
So the man is gone, the wife is gone, but this deep dive is called A Permanent City is Born. So the dream didn't die with them. What happened to the house, the 60-foot mansion?
Well, the house actually outlived them by quite a while, and this is key. It didn't just rot away. It became a tavern, a boarding house.
It transitioned from a private estate to public infrastructure.
Exactly. It remained a center of gravity, but its end was violent. And this connects us right back to the broader history of the nation. The house was destroyed in December 1863.
The Civil War.
The federal gunboat Restless, which is an ironic name considering Clark came for rest, shelled the town. St. Andrews had become a target.
And we'll get into why it was a target in our next chapter. But the result was the town was burned.
Yeah.
Clark's massive log home, that symbol of permanence, was turned to ash.
So if the house is gone, and the man is gone, and the town is burned, where is the permanence?
This is the aha moment for me. The building was destroyed, yes. But the town remained. Clark's legacy wasn't the logs, it was the momentum. He had pushed St. Andrews over that invisible line from camp to settlement.
Once people think of a place as a real place, you can burn the buildings, but the idea of the town survives.
Precisely. Even after the fire and destruction, the people came back, they rebuilt. Because it was already St. Andrews in their minds, it was home.
So when you walk through Old Town today, down Beach Drive, looking at the water, you are literally walking on the foundation Clark laid.
You are walking in the footprint of his decision. That salty spirit of St. Andrews, the independence, the resilience, it was anchored by him. He proved you could live there, not just visit.
It's amazing. One person's desire for a quiet retirement sparks the birth of a city.
It brings us back to that initial thought. He was the bridge. He took St. Andrews from a pantry to a hometown.
Now, you hinted that there was a reason St. Andrews became a target for that gunboat in 1863.
Yes, it was strategic. In this episode, we saw the settlement born from timber and location. But in the next chapter, we're going to see what happens when that settlement discovers a resource that makes it incredibly valuable to the Confederacy.
And incredibly dangerous to be around. We're talking about salt.
We are. The next deep dive, the Salt Works, will cover the rise and fall of the salt industry. It's an explosive chapter, literally, that changed the landscape forever. You won't want to miss it.
I can't wait. But before we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought on John Clark.
I've been thinking about the paradox of his life. He came to the frontier to escape the noise of civilization. He wanted peace. Yet, by building such a permanent, impressive home, he inevitably brought civilization right to his doorstep.
He brought the road, the neighbors, and tragically, the disease.
It just raises that question for all of us, doesn't it? Is it ever truly possible to build a permanent sanctuary without inviting the world in? Or does the very act of building a home just create a new center for the world to find you?
Something to chew on. Thanks for listening to the deep dive. We'll see you for chapter 3.
See you then.